Hi there guys, Totallydubbed here, and today I'm going to be looking at if 240Hz monitors are actually worth it. Now before I get into this video, I do want to thank NVIDIA for actually facilitating all of these tests. I'm not sponsored by them by any means. They've provided me a test PC with a capture card and an RTX 2080 Super in order to test all of this. Also, shout out to Acer, which provided me with a 240Hz monitor. Links for those products will be down in the description below in case you're interested as to finding out how I actually ran it. Now, aside the actual setup, there is a reason behind this video, and the biggest reason is purely because I've reviewed over 140 different monitors, from cheap TN based panels to really expensive IPS panels. And I really wanted to find out, once and for all, are 240Hz monitors worth it for someone like myself? Now when I say someone like myself, I don't think there's many people in the world that can kind of sit in this chair and tell you this information. The reason I say that, and not to sound arrogant, is simply because most people haven't tried 140 different monitors. And most people who potentially would have reviewed that many monitors wouldn't have come from a background of wanting to play at a competitive level. I have shoved over around 2,000 hours of competitive Counter-Strike, used to be global across 2 accounts and maintained global elite for quite a significant period of time back in the days. I ended up quitting CSGO because I got quite tired of it and due to hackers, and now I'm slowly getting back into it as well. Now, that's a little bit of a brief outline as to who I am and what I do and why potentially you might want to trust my opinion. As I said before at the start of this video, this is not sponsored. I have no ties whatsoever with any company. I am literally doing this purely on my own benefit for me, as much as to share it with you guys to find out if 240Hz monitors are worth it. And you might be wondering, why would I even ask the question? Because, well, 240Hz monitors are significantly more expensive than their non-240Hz variant. So without further ado, let's get into this detailed comparison. So now you will see a clip running in the background, and the clip running in the background, you'll see it several times over, to say the least, and therefore I will now explain as to what my setup is. To give you an idea, the footage that I've recorded, that the one that you just saw there that hasn't been slow-moed or anything, was recorded in true 240Hz 1080p. Now this basically means that the way I recorded it was via an external PC, and that's why I needed NVIDIA to send me a secondary PC in order to record all of this. Now the way it works is essentially I have a DisplayPort cable running to the main 240Hz monitor, then another cable that runs down to the secondary PC, which has the capture rig inside, and then the capture rig then outputs dual HDMI to a secondary non-240Hz monitor and allows me to then analyze the footage. This footage is then put in my editing software and then rendered at either 60Hz or 144Hz. And right now you'll be able to see the comparison between 240Hz and 60Hz. Now the differences between 240 and 60 are pretty obvious, to say the least. It's almost a night and day difference, and going into that sort of comparison is, not to say pointless, but you will be able to see yourself for the differences. People appear a lot faster in the transitions. The monitor itself feels a lot more responsive running at 240Hz versus at 60Hz, and more than anything you'll be able to see your enemies faster, and that's not even going into any technical details, it's just purely fact, just because of how the refresh rate works. Now you'll be able to see over here now a screenshot which essentially shows you the differences between 240Hz and 60Hz. The differences in this shot should be pretty obvious. You can see where I've outlined in red the bullet that's left the chamber and even where the enemy has appeared. Now this might seem very small when I've captured it frame by frame in this image. However, you can see over here, this is where you'll be able to see enemies appearing a little bit faster. Now, I can't stress it enough, the actual real-world differences when you're actually using the monitor at 240Hz versus 60Hz are a night and day. I don't think you have to be a professional for that. However, for me, it's not really 60Hz that really interests me, it's 144Hz. Because let's be honest, if you're a competitive Counter-Strike player, you're going to be looking at playing at 144Hz at an absolute bare minimum. That is let alone to say that if your graphics card can output that, and you might be able to see in the top right hand corner that my frames hover at around 200 to 270 FPS, in other words 270 Hertz. There was actually signs of tearing when I looked back through my footage, and yes, I did disable FreeSync and or G-Sync in order to absolutely avoid any sort of conflict there which happened with the processing of the signal and or in terms of input lag. Now, the difference between 240 Hz and 144 Hz is extremely minimal. The differences between 240 and 60 Hz were a lot more obvious. Now here you might actually even struggle to see the differences between the two. In fact, when I was looking back through the footage, it was quite hard for me to make out which one's 240 and which one's 144. If I put it as a blind test and I had to test it myself, which basically I did putting the two video files within my video editing software and just forgetting which one was the top layer and the bottom layer, I actually struggled to say the difference myself. This also somewhat translates to the real world experience. You do notice that there's a very minor difference between 144 Hz and 240 Hz. Now in these images, again, you will be able to see a frame by frame analysis, and you can see the differences are a lot minor versus 240 versus 60, whereas 240 versus 144, you can see the enemy here is almost on par. The shoulder is just a little bit further out, and the same goes for this enemy that's peeking around the corner at stairs on Mirage. You can see over here that, again, it's very minor. So then I said to myself, you know what, why don't I just go old school and do 144 Hz versus 60 Hz? And there's the pretty much old school saying of being like, oh, this was the benchmark before 240 Hz monitors came out. And the reason I did this comparison is purely to see also the differences between 144 Hz and 60 Hz, rather than using a placebo type of effect or just my own head or the settings to be like, oh, one is better than the other. Yet again, in this footage, you might be able to see that 144 Hz is a little bit more smoother versus 60 Hz. Now, do bear in mind, by the way, all this video itself will be rendered at 60 Hz. But the video files themselves within my video editor are running at 144 Hz or 240 Hz respectively. Just as an FYI, so that you guys aren't wondering why isn't this video file running at 240 Hz or 144 Hz, that's purely because YouTube doesn't actually support that. So in this respect, you can see 144 Hz is smoother than 60 Hz, and to be quite honest, the sort of conclusion between 60 Hz and 144 and 240 is purely that if you're going to be playing competitive games, and it's kind of a known fact, not even kind of, it is a known fact that if you want to make competitive games, you should be running at 100 plus Hertz consistently. And that doesn't even include the fact that your monitor should be running at 144 Hertz or above. In other words, you want to make sure that the frames of your graphics card are outputting more than 100 Hertz so that you benefit from those that refresh rate, and then more so the fact that your monitor is capable of accepting such a signal. So again, here you'll be able to see the difference between 60 Hz and 144 Hz. Shoulder peak over here, well not shoulder peak, but the peak over here is much less than it was versus 240 Hz. And again, the person running out again over here is much less. So I've talked at length about the differences between 60, 144 and 240 Hz. It's almost pointless for me to give you a sort of analysis of the data and the millisecond frames that you're going to see, because in all honesty, that means absolutely nothing to a consumer. And really what I do want to see is the differences between them and the visual differences. And hopefully I've showed you that via the video clips I provided and the essentially the editing in some which respect that I did. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. But what is my take on it? What is my personal take as a consumer? So it's obvious that 240 Hz is the highest refresh rate, and therefore will show you enemies faster than 144 Hz and 60 Hz. There's no denying that, it just will display frames faster. And as long as your processor or your PC is not going to be bottlenecking frames, and the fact that your graphical settings within CSGO or any other game are appropriately set so that you hit those type of frames, then you will see a benefit in 240 Hz monitors. But are they worth buying? So I played for a period of 2 months, so you can see how long I've been actually testing this monitor. Usually I don't test monitors for that period of time simply because they have to go back. Instead, over here, Acer and Nvidia provided me gear for over 2 months, and I've been in discussion with them for over 5 months to get this actually sorted. Every time I went on CSGO, I put on this 240Hz monitor. And I come from a 1440p 144Hz monitor. You'd naturally think someone like myself who's used a lot of monitors, tested a lot of monitors, plays on a daily basis pretty much as long as life permits, and also the fact that I play at a somewhat competitive level of Counter-Strike, you'd think that this guy over here is going to probably notice a difference. It's going to be a night and day difference between 144Hz, 1440p IPS, TN-based 1080p 240Hz panel. I will say that my performance at 240Hz was far worse than my performance at 1440p 144Hz. There is different reasons behind that, and to be quite honest with you, there is the underlining factor for me that I didn't see a benefit to make myself a better player running at 240Hz. Even though those little amount of frames and pixels will appear a little bit faster, the overall panel didn't make me a better player and wouldn't make me want to go out and spend 520 odd pounds on a 240Hz monitor when I could spend around 400 pounds on a better resolution, better quality looking 144Hz panel instead. That's let alone TN based 144Hz panel, which are far cheaper. So hopefully I'm not waffling or not making sense to you guys. Hopefully I'm making enough sense to you. But essentially, someone like myself wouldn't even buy a 240Hz monitor. So why should you, potentially who's tried, I don't know, 10 monitors, 20 monitors at tops, go out and buy a 240Hz monitor? In fact, why do even manufacturers sell it? Well, there's a bit of marketing behind that, and there's a bit of esports behind that. There's a reason why professional players play at 240Hz, because they don't care about all the other elements of a monitor. They only care purely on how fast the frames will be refreshed on a monitor, and therefore the highest amount of refresh rates that they can get is basically a better experience. It's not to say that that monitor specifically, or this Acer monitor specifically, is the best option for them. It's just the fact that they want to get the utmost amount of frames. So I've got nothing against pros using it, and I've got nothing against companies like, I don't know, Acer, Asus, ROG as well, AOC, all of these guys. I have no problems with them spending marketing budget in order to put 240Hz monitors in front of consumers because of pros that use it at these massive competitive events. But as a consumer, as someone like myself who would buy a monitor with their hard-earned cash, you should consider that there are a few elements that take place with a monitor. Refresh rate is just one story. You've got the actual quality of the panel. So for example, this TN panel displayed really poor color accuracy. And when it came to actually looking at enemies, when I was just panning left or right, I actually ended up seeing enemies better, although a little bit slower, on my IPS panel because the colors and the contrast was far better than the TN panel would ever be able to achieve. Then you've got the response time of the monitor. The response time of this Acer monitor specifically is decent. It's quoted at 0.4 milliseconds. That's faster than anything that's ever been created. The only issue with that is that that only runs at overdrive on extreme. And overdrive on extreme induces of inverse ghosting, which is not something that's factored in the marketing claims, which where you do come as a consumer and you play on Counter-Strike, let alone any other game, and you put extreme overdrive on a monitor like this, you're going to notice a lot of smearing happening in the background. To the point where you see this enemy popping around the corner, you're going to see a little trail, a purple trail occurring behind them. And you might think this enemy is over here rather than over here. So regardless of 240Hz, you should consider the ghosting element that happens with these monitors running at their fastest overdrive setting. And then, let alone that, you've then got the input lag. The input lag, which is essentially when you take your mouse left and right and you click and shoot, the amount of time the monitor takes to respond to that input is called input lag. And that also causes another type of element that you should consider. Unfortunately, manufacturers don't quote input lag times, and the only way you would find this information is via a reviewer like myself or people like TFT Central, who will then actually analyze the input lag via complex software and hardware in order to give you an idea of the input lag. So, what I'm trying to say over here essentially is that there's a lot of elements that go around 240 Hz monitors, or monitors generally speaking. You shouldn't just jump at marketing claims, and you shouldn't just jump at what the pros use, therefore I will use. Remember, there are certain reasons why these pros are using them, and there's certain reasons why you should potentially consider other monitors. So, there we go guys, it's been a long video, a lot of talking on my part. Hopefully you've stayed in tune. I just really wanted to go in depth and talk about my complete, honest opinions around 240 Hz. If you like this type of video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more, favourite and share if you feel that this video will be helpful to others, and let me know in the comments below what you make of 60, 144 and 240 Hz monitors. I'll be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed, take care and bye bye.